So hello and welcome everyone to another SAP video. Now this SAP video is from a consultant perspective. I would say that this is not very specific to functional folks or is not very specific to the technical resources. This is more from a consultant perspective, but if you are new, it should be fine. It should add some value to you all the same. New as in if you are a new functional resource or just got into development, this should add some value to you all the same. So the idea is not to overwhelm you with too much details, but this is a topic that is important to an SAP consultant from whatever background they are from. So whether you are a functional consultant or whether you are a technical consultant, whether you are from basis or security, maybe for basis and security it may not be a lot relevant, but this is something that is certainly going to add value to you from an SAP architecture standpoint. So let's get into it. We are going to talk about this transaction SPRO. So transaction SPRO is basically short for SAP Project Reference Object. This is the place to configure the system based on the organization's structure, processes, and requirements. Configuring the various modules offered by SAP needs to be carried out here in order to make use of and map the organization's processes to SAP. So if you are from the material management or from the sales and distribution or finance background, this is typically the place where you would go in and make your configurations so that it is usable for the customer or client to run their daily processes. While making configurations for the first time, it is highly advisable to spend some time reading the usually detailed documentation that exists for each configuration node. So we will take a short look at an example for this as well. From a technical standpoint, as I already mentioned earlier, this is not only from a functional standpoint, it's also from a technical standpoint. So I would say overall it's from an SAP consultant viewpoint that DDIC or data dictionary concepts like check tables, views, cluster views will also help understanding the architecture better. So you will be able to connect what the functional people do and how it affect how the processes run technically in the background. So let's quickly jump into the system where we can see how the transaction SPRO looks like. So I was already in the SPRO. Let me get into it again. So I go into the transaction SPRO and here I go into the display SAP reference IMG. So you see a lot of different nodes that typically represent different modules within SAP. There are some common ones as well. So something like enterprise structure will have to be defined whatever module you're working on. So you see here you have some segregations of financial accounting, controlling, logistics, sales and distribution, material management, logistics execution, plant maintenance, human resource management, etc. So what each node does. So you have a documentation option here that helps you understand what each of these nodes does. Sometimes it is a short documentation, sometimes it's a bit more detailed. Whatever be the case, if you are starting off or if you are new to creating configurations within SAP, it is highly recommended that you take some time to read this documentation. Not that it is a compulsion, but it always gives you more insights as to what the node does. You may think that the node does A and C and D. Probably the C and D scenarios are not very common and hence they are not touched, but you should know that there is an option to do a C and D as well, and these documentation would be of help in those cases. Okay, so this, as we are discussing, gives you details on which different modules you want to implement and what you can do in each of these. There is another transaction code that I would like to quickly touch upon. This is SIMGH. Now this is a transaction code that I typically use because when you use the SPRO transaction, you are able to see the nodes of all modules, and sometimes scrolling up and down can take some time and be a little tedious. So this SIMGH is a transaction code that helps you only look at specific nodes within the IMG. Let's see if there is any option with sales and distribution. Yes, so you see there are different nodes that are popping up with sales and distribution option, whether it's basic function sales and distribution, enterprise services sales and distribution. Let me go with the sales and distribution only. I also add this as my favorite. Now I choose this and we go to display, and now you see that you only see the sales and distribution node, you do not see the other nodes. So this helps you in terms of just looking at the node that you are looking to work with. You can add various nodes there, obviously. You can add it to the favorites. I'm just taking one example here in the interest of time. Okay, so we now go into a little bit depth in terms of what we were discussing on the views, the check table or the cluster views. Now usually when you are using different transaction codes, so again example of sales is when you are using VA01 for instance, and you are trying to use a sales document type. If the sales document type is not available or not configured, you typically get a message that this sales document type is not recognized or this doesn't seem to be available. In those lines you will get an error message from SAP. So I just navigated to the node within sales documents, header. You see that you have define sales document types. So this is where you will define sales document types. Is this a session on sales and distribution and sales document types? No, but I wanted to give you an example. Now typically when you enter a node and you directly see a table kind of a structure, it usually means that there is linked to this transaction code, there is a single table. Now how do you understand or confirm, because there are so many nodes, there might be so many different tables, it's not possible to remember each time which table it represents. Obviously when you keep working with these nodes day in and day out in different projects, you are going to remember a lot of things. You will remember what table there is underneath. But just in case you don't remember, there is a right click option and you go to this display technical info. When you do that and you go to the maintain or maintenance objects, you will be able to see more details as to what view or what table lies behind this particular node in the configuration. And how do I know it's a view? Because here when I see the type, it says V, which means it's a view. And the customizing object says V underscore TVAK. So TVAK should be one of the tables that is one of the underlying tables. So one quick tip is you will see any customizing object that has V underscore or ends with underscore V will usually be a view. So view is primarily a representation of a table or a set of tables that gives you specific fields to work with. Here you also see that there is a transaction code for this, which means you don't have to really navigate to this node from IMG. You can directly modify or make updates to this particular node from this transaction code VOV8. Now let's just quickly check VOV8. Does it represent that same table? Yes, you see, maintain sales order types. That is what we were looking at. Sales order types or sales document types. That is what we were looking at. So even though you have gone through a direct transaction code, you are able to get to the same point that you were able to get to from the IMG node. So this is a simple single table view. How about a cluster view? What is a cluster view and why are we even talking about this concept? Now, from a technical standpoint, it is very useful to understand because sometimes you might face issues. There is a message that says something is not available. You want to track down which table, what configuration is not maintained. So you might need to know what is the underlying view or what is the underlying table in those scenarios. So let's see, here I have something called as copy control for sales documents. Now remember when I told you, so let me first go into this transaction. So whenever you see a single table, you remember I told you that means that there is a single view or a single table that is underneath the node. But when you see a structure or a tree structure like this, you see a node with other options, other folders, this usually means that it is a view cluster. So view cluster, they are linked of course by some field value, and that is kind of the linkage between the two tables. So now how do I know what is the view cluster or does this have a separate transaction code for this maintaining this node? If I go back and again I go to display technical info, go to maintain objects. Here you see again there is a transaction code mentioned and the type is C, which typically tells you it is a view cluster, right? So when there is a separate transaction code, it tells you that you can also get to that same node with the separate transaction code. But do all view clusters and do all views have separate transaction codes created? Not really. But here you can see this one has it, VTAA. This is basically view cluster or copy control maintained for sales document to sales document copy. You don't need to really know this, but this is just an example. Now, can we look at an example where there is no view or there is no transaction code, for example? Yeah, so let's go and maybe check the returnable packaging processing. Let's give it a try. Does this have also a tree? Yes, it has tree. So you can see that there is a complex tree structure. You have folder inside folders, which tells you that there will be more than one table linked to this information. Again, if I want to go back, I would like to check what is underneath, what is the technical info for this. I go to the maintenance objects. Okay, now here you see this transaction SM34. Now I can tell you, we will also be looking at it, that okay, let's go to the SM34. Does this take me directly to this node? The answer would be no, but you will see it in a moment. Here you see it's a view cluster editing, which means this is more of a generic transaction. It is not specific to any table. So here you can put your view cluster table name, and when you do a display, then you see the relevant information, which means this is another way of looking at any view cluster. Whether the view cluster has a transaction or not doesn't matter. This is the generic transaction code SM34. Now SM30 you may be aware of. For single views you can use the SM30 transaction. When you want to see a view cluster, you use the SM34 transaction. And here you will be able to do a display. If you have the authorization of maintain, you can also do a maintain from here. But how about when I want to know what are the underlying tables in this case? Now TVCPAA, let's check if we have a table called TVCPAA. No. So it says that TVCPAA does not exist. So now if I want to know what are the underlying tables, how do I get to know that? So there is another transaction code. Now this technical people may be aware of, but I'm not sure how much they have used. So if you want to create a table maintenance, you can also use the SE54 transaction. Now for normal views, you use the first button here, which is defaulted. If I want to see a view cluster, I will need to go in here. Again, you see, because the other transaction code we were looking at this table, it has automatically taken that same name. This is a parameter ID concept. Maybe we can discuss it in another video. And here if I do a display, you will get to see what is the object or what are the objects underneath. Now let me go and check the object structure. This header gives you the details of the description, etc. If you want to see what are the tables underneath, you do a double click. They can be tables or they can be views. Now here I can see as the header mentions here. And if you remember, we just discussed that whatever starts from V underscore or ends with underscore V, in most cases will be a view. Can there not be a V underscore table? There can be. But in most cases, like we are saying, in my experience, more than 80% of these cases would be a view, would be pointing to a view. So here, if I want to further drill down to see what this view consists of or what tables does this view constitute of, I can click on this DDIC and you will see that it takes me actually to the maintenance view. Here if I go and check the table join conditions, it will give me exactly the tables that are being used in the background. Now for technical people, this might be something you already know, but you get to know how this is actually applied in SPRO with this. And for functional people, you get an idea what are the underlying tables. So I plan to create another video with the T related tables, which are in most cases the configuration tables in the background. So here you get an idea that the header table or the header view is this view, the item view is this one, the schedule line view is this one. So this gives you a fair idea how the tables are now technically connected to the configuration that happens in SPRO. So what the functional resource does and what the technical resource sometimes has to do or analyze is connected here. So sometimes you may need to add fields to standard tables, right? So how does that affect your transaction codes? So this is how you will see that, in either in a sales order transaction code or maybe a configuration transaction code. If you want to maintain a new field, then you will have to add it to a table, and then through this view and through this cluster view concept, it starts becoming available in the configuration itself. Okay, so I think we have covered quite a bit of information. Hope this was helpful to you. So you can, just to quickly summarize, you can find out the transaction code if there exists a transaction code underneath any node within SPRO, and you can also find out whether there is which table or what view is being represented by a specific node. It can be a single view or it can be a cluster view. Okay, so more details from consultant perspective in upcoming videos. Hope this added some value to you. Thank you so much.